I'm Dave Albrechtha. This is Lawyers as Healers, where I explore how lawyers are becoming healers of human conflict. Welcome back to Lawyers as Healers. Today, I am really pleased to be joined by Gina Steele. Gina creates supportive communities of lawyers and coaches them so that they can go from being overwhelmed and exhausted to experiencing fulfillment and energy and real impact in their careers. And before becoming a coach, Gina practiced law for almost 2 decades, which ended in the hospital from a healthcare crisis, which I'm sure we'll chat about, caused by stress. And after recovering from that and finding joy in her career, she became passionate about helping other people do the same. So sounds like a great story, Gina. I'm really excited to talk to you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So with that intro and that being said, I think we have to start with, take us through your journey through your legal career, and then we'll talk about what you transitioned to. But
Okay.
what got you interested in law? What was your law school experience? Where did you end up after law school? Just give me the whole
Okay.
rundown. Yeah.
Boy, it's been a while since I thought of all of that, but
Yeah.
I just want to say that my law career didn't end when I landed in the hospital.
Okay.
It actually ended when it was good and I felt like called to help other attorneys have better careers. So
Yeah.
just
Nice.
start by saying that, but I'll
I
kind of going back
appreciate
to the
that.
beginning. It started when I was really, really young. My dad was an attorney. He's still alive, but retired. And he was a litigator in a very small town. I mean, he pretty much did everything: wills, trusts, personal injury. He represented the bank. He did everything. So when I was about 13, I started following him around to courthouses and really got a sense for the law. And I think I just kind of grew up always having this sense of like, there has to be justice. There has to be justice. And I never, like from about 13 on, I didn't really think of doing anything else. Went to undergrad. I was a math major in undergrad because I thought, okay, well, logic will be important in the law, and went to law school. Law school, honestly, was not a fun experience for me, but I don't think it's a fun experience for most people. I hope that that's changing. I'm actually doing some work with a small law school in San Jose called Lincoln Law School, and their dean is a friend of mine, and she's really trying to make like the experience of going to law school good, which I applaud. And I think it's important because law school sort of induces stress. Like I remember walking in the door and my orientation, and it was all like, you're going to be graded on a curve, and it's going to matter where you land. I went to University of Minnesota, which was like, I'd say a second tier law school, so there's a lot of competition.
Yeah.
And there was just so much competition, and it was a terrible time for the economy when I was in law school. A lot of lawyers were getting laid off. So there was a lot of stress. And with stress came more competition. And with more competition and stress it was harder to study. It was harder to learn. And now that I've studied neuroscience, I get that.
Yeah.
And I went to a tiny little undergraduate. Like I said, I studied math. So like learning all the vocabulary of being a lawyer was hard, because it's like when your dad practices in a small town, it's, you don't learn words like stare decisis and all of those things. So, and I'd never studied con law because I was like, oh, I'll get those in law school. So, and I think it's really too bad that in law school, we start by sort of almost pitting people against each other. At least that was what was encouraged where I went to law school. I think that sets us up for issues in the profession, because like when we compete against ourselves and we try to be the best we can be, we're great lawyers. When we're trying to outdo each other, then we have, and what I had at the time was a scarcity mindset. Like in law school, there's a scarcity mindset of there are only so many A's to go around, and you've got to fight like to get one.
Yes.
And that's like, I don't think it's realistic. Like the profession needs us to work together. Our clients need us to be working together. So, I guess law school wasn't fun. I was really excited about it in undergrad because I was like, I'm going to finally get to be a lawyer. And then law school was pretty stressful. I put myself through. I was worried about my loans. Now looking back, I'm like, wow, they were nothing compared to what people come out with now. And I think that that's an issue too, because the cost has gone up so much, and government loans, like they're so limited. So a lot of people are going into debt, and that creates like stress at the beginning of the career. So I did make it through law school. My first job out of law school was actually one of my favorites, and that's that I worked for a state court judge as a clerk, and I learned so much in that job. And one thing that I really learned was communication was the most important thing. That if you could clearly communicate, you could be a good lawyer. And I did that in Rochester, Minnesota, which is where Mayo Clinic is. So it's a town of about 70,000. And one thing that was nice was that lawyers were still getting along pretty well with each other because they saw each other every day.
Mm.
And I would go with the judges to the bar association meetings, and they were fun. Like there was a collegiality there that when I got to law school and then later to Silicon Valley, there isn't as much. So I clerked, and then I got into doing some kind of commercial litigation, contracts, things like that. And to be honest, I was a little bit bored. And I had this math degree, and I always wanted to do IP, but you couldn't do patents with a math degree. So I actually took a break from law school and went back and got a master's in computer science. And
Ugh.
part of the reason I want to say that is because there's this idea, I think, in law, at least back at the time, this was late 90s, so it was a while ago, but that like you couldn't veer off. You couldn't do something creative. You had to stick to this path. You had to get on law review, become the summer associate, get to the big firm, and that was how you made it. That was how you made money. And that's just not true. Like you can veer off and come back. So I veered off, got my master's in computer science, came back like, oh my gosh. I went from struggling to get a job out of law school because there were very few jobs to having a master's in computer science in the late 90s. So
Yeah.
a lot of doors opened, and I ended up in a big firms, a couple of different big firms, and a couple like very high respectable IP boutiques, and did patent litigation. And it was fun, but it was stressful.
Yeah.
It was, they call it the sport of kings. A lot of money is often on the line. And because of that, people sort of tend to think that it matters more. I remember once having a conversation where it was 2 a.m. and it was the 2 days before trial started. We were in a hotel in Wilmington, Delaware, and I was dead tired, and I was trying to write this brief, and I just couldn't. I just was so tired. And I went to the senior associate and I said, look, if I go to bed and I wake up tomorrow at like 8 o'clock, I can write this in an hour.
Yeah.
But if I stay here now, it's going to take me 6 hours, and I'm not going to get any sleep, and I'm not going to do well tomorrow. So please let me go to bed. And he was like, no, we got to get it done. We got to get it
Oh my
done now.
gosh.
And it was not good. And he was like, because there's so much money on the line. And afterwards, we ended up settling the case, and he and I were having drinks in the bar. And I was like, look, we're not doctors.
Yeah.
We can go to sleep.
Yeah.
And then I don't say that. I want to say that I do think the work of lawyers is so important, and that played into getting into a coach. So I'll talk about that. But I was like, no, we're just not that important. Like if we're just taking money. It might be lots of it where we're moving it from one big company to another.
Yeah.
And a lot of lawyers do important things, but it was not worth not getting any sleep. Also, and I love learning the neuroscience, which I learned when I was a coach, to learn none of that made sense to me, this idea of staying up all night. I was like, I'm not doing my best work. Why are we? And I remember thinking, it's one thing to do a 15-hour day and then be so tired that you only do 3 hours the next day, and then you're still kind of making up the rest of the week. Or you could do 9 hours every single day if things are managed well.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an idea I had. And anyway, so I was working at a big firm, senior associate, and senior associates at big firms, they manage everything. They manage the partners. They have to try to get the partners to make sure they're doing their work. They get the associates to do their work. They're supposed to be the go-between between everyone. So a lot of stress. It was when e-discovery was really getting big. And so the firm had gone from having maybe 200,000 pages of documents to 3 or 4 million. So we were trying to deal with that. I was on 2 cases. I should not have been. No one should have been on both of these cases. We did not have big enough teams. And I just kept getting stressed and more stressed and more stressed, got burned out, was really struggling to do my work, and finally just landed in the hospital. And my first thought was not, oh my God, I'm in the hospital with a blood clot. My first thought was like, thank God I can sleep for a week.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that unfortunately is, true for still, I
Yeah.
coach some young lawyers and I think that they probably feel a little bit that same way. And so that was my first thought. My second thought was, I've got to figure out a better way to live. This isn't working. This is not sustainable. And I saw that there were attorneys at the big firms that had figured out how to have a sustainable life. They knew how to communicate well. They were able to set boundaries. They did their work well. And part of that, though, was that they set the boundaries so they could be doing those 9-hour days every day instead of doing the 18-hour day and then a 3-hour day. And so I started trying to figure out how do I do this? I was on leave, and luckily I'd hired a coach, and she gave me one of John Kabat-Zinn's books, and that was my introduction to mindfulness. And
Mm,
that really changed the way I looked at things, and I realized it is that space, that ability to think and respond the way you want to respond instead of
yeah.
responding like automatically from your emotions that really will help your career. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, I think it's really important. I think we'll get into this later, in lawyers and how they deal with opposing counsel and their clients. But
Yeah.
it's very important for lawyers to have a good career, to be able to do that in the firm. And so
Right.
much of whether or not you're seen as a leader is, can you take that space? Are you actually being thoughtful? And so I should get, it was like a 600-page book on mindfulness. So I
Yeah.
got through it. And luckily there was a mindfulness retreat at Spirit Rock at
Yeah.
the next month.
Yeah.
In the book,
Nice.
they mentioned Spirit Rock. It's a mindfulness center, place for retreats in very close to where I live in Northern California. And I was like, oh, I should look it up. And I looked it up, and there was a CLE for lawyers.
Yeah.
And I went, and it was really interesting because this was, I'm going to totally date myself, but this was in 2007, and I was the only big firm lawyer there.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, I'm here because I want to get the skills so I can go back to the big firm and survive. And everybody else was doing mostly family law and public defenders and some real estate. But I made it through the mindfulness retreat. It helped. One thing that really helped me is I got into doing a lot of Pilates as well, which is another form of mindfulness. And later I got into doing some Qigong. So I really think that, like, you have to find the mindfulness practice that works for you. And sometimes it's movement.
Yeah.
And part of it is just that, having that mindfulness awareness of trying to live every day where you're bringing your attention back. You're noticing what you want to focus on and bringing your attention back. And I think that makes you a better lawyer. I think it's very key to be a good lawyer. I also think it's easier to be a mom. It makes it easier to be a good person, just
Yeah.
to live, to thrive. So I did that. I learned a lot. I started studying some neuroscience, and I learned that all those things that I was thinking, like, if I don't get enough sleep, I'm not doing a very good job, were true. Which, it's like
Right.
validation. So that was nice. And I ended up deciding to switch my practice up a little bit, because I realized what I really, really loved was the technology, and that's why I had become a patent lawyer. So I became a patent prosecutor, and I started my own firm, and it was
Mm,
actually going quite well, and I enjoyed it. But there was just this call to being a coach. It was like, if I spend an hour of doing this, then I can go read. There's a author, Dan Siegel, who does a lot on neuroscience and mindfulness, and I was like, okay, now I need to become a coach. So
yeah.
I I went back. I got my coaching credential. I actually started by working in an MBA school with a friend of mine
Okay.
who was teaching and really
Nice.
helping those students. And then I kind of transitioned that to helping lawyers.
Yeah. Amazing. What a journey.
It's been quite the journey.
Yeah.
Hopefully that
Are
wasn't too long.
No, it's great. Are you still practicing at all?
No,
Do you
in
have a law practice?
2016, I ended my last case, and I just was done. I also I had kids in 2017 and 2021. So coaching is a little bit more flexible for that as well. But I when I wanted to become a coach, I realized, and I don't just coach lawyers, I do coach other people, other lots of engineers and other professionals. But I realized that I wanted to step back from practicing law and help change the profession. And I felt that
Mm,
coaching lawyers the best way for me to do that. And I just want to say, like, I think lawyers do important work. And that's why I was excited to come on your podcast, because I think that's kind of the idea of your podcast.
Yeah.
When we hear that quote, and I think it's Henry V, let's kill all the lawyers. It wasn't because they didn't like lawyers. It was because they wanted to create chaos.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I want to talk to you about that last part you said there about, what that you want to help change the profession, and coaching seemed like a good way to do that. And so I'd love to get your perspective on, what needs to change in the profession. I mean, and I think there's multiple elements to this, right? And what I've been focusing on is kind of there's two sides to that coin. One is how we're helping clients and how we do the work that impacts the world, why lawyers are so
mhm,
important, as you talk about. And then the other is just our own well-being and being able to manage the work so that we can do the good work and that we don't all burn out and leave the profession. And so, yeah, just curious, like from your experience, and then as a lawyer and your experience as a coach, like what are the top couple things that you think can change, and how can coaching help change those?
those are great questions. First, I want to say, like, I think these two issues are really intertwined,
Yeah.
that we need to heal lawyers so that lawyers can be better healers. And when you think about that, like I said, I love studying neuroscience. I was a patent geek. I love the science part. But lawyers right now are so often in fight or flight because there's
Mm,
so much stress. There's so much pressure for the money. There's so much on top of them. And when we're in fight or flight, like, we're more likely to react aggressively. And also our focus narrows. When you're in fight or flight, your focus narrows to what is the issue that I have to solve in front of me. And we lose our access to our empathy circuits when we're in fight or flight.
mm,
And I think as lawyers, and to really be in that leadership role that our society is calling us for. So, right now our society is really calling for lawyers to be the leaders, to be the best leaders they can be. We have to have access to our empathy circuits. We have
yeah.
to be able to show empathy to our clients, but also help our clients show empathy. And also, I always think that if all the lawyers in the room had been healed several things, like there's an Enron scandal years ago.
Yeah.
And there's always these scandals we hear about. And if the lawyer in the room is in a good place, if they're thriving, if they're able to access, not just their thinking part of the brain, but their full abilities, and have that access, then it's their role, and they can be that leader. When they have like good leadership presence, they can be that leader and say, hey, no, we shouldn't do this. This is not okay.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an argument that we can get around the law this way, or find the pit hole here, or sorry, loophole here,
Yeah.
but we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Let's think about our actions. Let's think about how this will affect society.
Yeah.
And I think that lawyers do have that. I think I see that as our job in society. And I think that, back in the time, I've always loved Lincoln. I grew up in Illinois. So
Hmm.
I went to visit Salem, his birthplace, all the time. And like we actually got his birthday off, not President's Day. And my dad was born on
Interesting.
his birthday. So like I've always
Yeah.
been a fan of Lincoln. And I think Lincoln was that kind of lawyer
Yeah.
that really stood up. And I think there have been these great lawyers over the years that have stood up and really been the leaders for society, have really gotten us through. I'm not sure if the Roosevelts, I don't think they were lawyers, but also, like, again, like having that empathy, like, let's look at what's best.
Mm.
We all do better when we all do better.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Lincoln has that one fantastic quote. I don't remember it verbatim, but about, we shouldn't be encouraging our neighbors to resolve and settle disputes.
Hmm.
There will be work enough. I know that's how he ends it, which references all of this, that, if we all lift it all up together,
Hmm.
we all do better. Yeah.
Yes. And we can't lift it up if we're so exhausted and
Yeah, that's right.
stressed and
That's right.
practically burned out.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you said something in there that triggered something for me when you're talking about, we can't access our empathy and compassion and understanding, all that whole, those neural pathways when we're stressed, when we're in fight or flight mode. It made me think about law school a little bit more, because it's, I think your experience is, that's how my experience was. And I also hope things are changing in that regard,
Yeah.
but I think it'll take some time. But that you're almost trained, like there's all those, you've probably looked at these, there's a lot of psychological studies about how law school affects the brain and how people are more compassionate, understanding at the beginning, and when they come out, their scope is limited. We turn into these kind of analytical robots where we're just looking at issue, rule, analysis, conclusion over and over
Mhm.
again, and we don't see anything else, and we can't access those. But I almost wonder, hearing you talk about that, I was like, oh, I wonder if there's more of a component of, like, it's always a chicken and the egg thing, right? If we're just all super stressed out in law school, and so we're just turning those things off automatically because all we can think about is limiting the scope to the analytical, logical approach, and turning off that other circuitry almost out of survival, right?
Right.
Or if it's actually law school that's reprogramming our brain, and maybe it's a mixture of both. But you said that, and I'm like, oh, man, I wonder which one comes first.
Yeah, and
You know?
I don't know if I don't know. I think it really is a iterative process,
Yeah, yeah,
because like the more compassion we have, the more like the good feel good chemicals in our brain are released, the more
yes,
we can trust.
yeah,
And so that's an issue. So we're limiting ourselves, but also we're like so focused on analytics
yeah.
that we're taught almost to cut the people out and just focus on analytics. But like, law is a human profession. It's
That's
about
right.
affecting people's lives. So I think there need to be changes, and I think it's iterative. Like if we teach people to think more about impact, and also if we can like make lawyers less stressed during law school. When like let's step back for a minute.
Uh-huh.
Is anyone's life at risk when you're in
I
law
know.
school?
I know.
But
That's
we're
right.
taught like we're taught that our lives are at risk. Like we're taught
Yeah.
like if you don't do well on this test, you're never going to be a good lawyer. And I
Yeah.
just want to say like I recently interviewed someone. I'm doing a summit. His name is Jimmy Lai, and he he couldn't find a job out of law school. He failed the bar three times, and he's running a 7-figure law school. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry, law
Wow.
firm. He's running a 7-figure law firm. Like every test you take in law school is not determinative of your life.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
right.
it's sad that we make people feel that way because we're just narrowing that focus. We're causing lawyers to lose access to those empathy circuits right away. And we're causing them to just think in terms of high stakes for everything.
Yeah. And that all comes back. It's brilliant that you brought up the scarcity mindset, and that's hammered into us in law
Hmm.
school, whether explicitly or implied, that there's no, like you said, there's only so many A's to go around. There's also
Hmm.
this like hovering idea that there's only so many jobs out there once everybody
Right.
gets out, and you've got to do these things to be in the best position to get those jobs. And
Hmm.
you're absolutely right about that. And each one of these things, the competition to book the class, the get the best grade, to get the
Hmm.
best job. I mean, all of these are intertwined and create this stress-filled environment
Right.
that is,
And
yeah,
yeah,
it's
and
just so
scarcity.
harmful.
Yes, and scarcity goes so much with competition. When we feel like
Yeah, right.
we're competing for limited resources, we compete. And when we compete, we're at a negotiation for a deal. We don't like try to grow the pie by
Yes, right.
working out the best situation for both sides. The lawyers, let's face it, lawyers are constantly getting into competitions with the other side and they want to win instead of stepping back and thinking, what's best for my client?
That's
Would
right.
it be good for them to settle this litigation and have a business partner going forward?
Yeah,
And that's got to come in. And I think that's what I loved about the way you named your podcast. Like, I think that when we have more of a healer mindset,
yeah.
we have this abundance mindset. When we see our job as growing the pie,
Yeah.
our society will benefit.
Yes. I love that perspective on it. I've been working on this solo episode, which I hope to release soon, but it's comparing our understanding of ecology, which
Mm,
we all now have this. I mean, first of all, ecology is some ancient wisdom, and white Western culture is just only now catching up.
yeah.
But this understanding in a scientific way of how everything's connected and how, one little change to an ecosystem can cause a complete collapse. And a lot of these things are unseen, and you've got to trace it through the whole ecosystem to figure out what happened. And I think we could do ourselves a big favor by seeing our human community in the same way. And that,
Hmm.
one little thing that a lawyer does, whether it's overly aggressive deposition where they just destroy the other party just for the sake of it to intimidate them, or any of those things lawyers do, the ripples that sends out and the impact that has on a person's world and all
Hmm.
these connections are huge. And we don't think about, I think we're not trained to think about it that way. We're trained to have this very
Yes.
myopic,
Yes.
it's just the person in front of us. And
Hmm.
so I think you're speaking to that very well.
Yeah. I think that's an issue. And it reminds me of a litigation I was involved in. And that like we were lucky because we had an older woman who was testifying, and she had started this company with her husband years ago. And the other side decided to beat up on her.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that's why we won the case.
Yeah. Yep.
Because we have to remember too that like the ultimate results, if you're in litigation, it's you're going before a jury. Like the more human you are and the better the stories are and the more you can relate, the better you're more likely you
Case is
are
going to
to
be.
win.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. And just also like there are these little places where if lawyers stepped back and thought about what really is the greater good, and I think, I read a lot about like what's been going on in politics in our society, and like in the 50s, my understanding is that corporations really saw the public as a stakeholder,
Yes. Yeah.
and I think if we want to live in a good world, that's got to come back, and I think lawyers can be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a huge shift away from that. I think there's that case with of the Ford company, an early Ford
Mhm.
company case where where he was looking out for the public and the greater good, and he got sued by the shareholders who said, "You got to care about us more than the
Mhm.
public." They won, and that
Yeah.
changed the trajectory of that and gotten us to where we are now, I think.
Yeah. And when you think it was lawyers that made the decision, because lawyers become
Exactly.
judges.
I know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's part of it, right? Like, I think we oftentimes forget how big of an impact we have on, I mean, we're policymakers at the end of the day. I
Exactly.
mean,
We
we
are.
are an equal branch of the government that's, we might not be making legislation in the same way, but we sure are impacting how it gets interpreted and creating
Mhm.
policy, you know?
And
Yeah.
also, like, how many presidents and legislators are trained as
Absolutely.
lawyers.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
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 So that's
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah. Why it's so
that's
important, why you gotta
yeah,
consider this
exactly. That's
bigger
why
picture, right? I mean,
that's why I
yeah,
was like, you know what? If I become a coach, I can have and help more lawyers. I can spread this
yeah,
and have a bigger impact than just being a
absolutely.
lawyer myself.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. Yeah, so I wanted to talk to you, kinda steer the conversation towards something I saw on your website, which was the neuroscience of civility.
Mhm.
Really jumped out at me, and I was excited to talk to you about that. And I wanna, like, lead into that with just something that has occurred to me as I've done these mediation trainings and opened myself up to how compassion and understanding ought to be a part of our training. And realizing that to trace this all the way through, again, you go through this law school experience that's deeply competitive, stressful, scarcity, everything we've talked about. You come out with very little practical training, and
Mhm.
and at least my experience, zero training on empathy or compassion or understanding or any of those things, or even just basic human psychology about conflict, right? This is one
Mhm.
of the things that has blown me away looking back and looking at law schools is that we're conflict professionals. We are the conflict professionals, and we have no idea how to manage conflict or the basic psychology of a person who is in high conflict. And then we get told when we get out about professionalism. And likewise, there's no guidance in law school about professionalism. It's just this word that gets thrown at you and you're told, be professional. And the most that we're told is you should go, instead of just calling or writing a letter, take your opposing counsel to lunch or coffee and sit down and like, that's kind of the extent of the instructions we get about what that means. At least that was my experience. And so I really wanted to pick your brain about, thinking about lawyers working together collaboratively, which is such a huge piece of what we do. And that, here we're left with really no tools in our toolbox to know what professionalism really truly means, like how to engage in a conversation with someone where you're in conflict with them, and how to actively listen and loop and learn and engage in these ways. And we're not taught how to do that, but then we're told be professional.
Mhm.
But it's like telling a 2-year-old to go ride a pedal bike without any experience and just go pedal the bike. I mean, there's no
Mhm.
skill set to do it. So I'd love to hear the neuroscience piece of that with that
Okay.
background.
Well, it's interesting because in California now, part of the reason I created that CLE is that we have these specialized courses that you have to take for your every 3 years when you report. And one of them is now a CLE on civility.
Amazing.
And what's interesting though is, you brought up a lot of things about like why lawyers aren't taught to be civil. But when you look at the definition of civil, I can't remember the exact words, but it basically comes down to be kind, cooperative, and honest,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
kind of is what we're taught in kindergarten.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I looked at it and I was like, why do we need this as lawyers? Why do we need a class? And I think you brought up some reasons about how we're trained and the fact that we're not given a tool set of how to be civil, how to work together.
Yeah.
And so when you think about law, and we've talked about this, there's stress, pressure for billing, things are high stakes. You're often dealing with difficult people. Your clients can have trauma. So you've got some vicarious trauma with dealing with your clients.
Yeah.
There's conflict. You've got the opposing counsel being really difficult. I might have said that, but I think it's okay to say it twice.
Yes.
So you have all these things that actually will activate your nervous system and put you in fight or flight.
Yeah.
And when that happens, like I said, your empathy circuit shuts down, the part of the brain that thinks and organizes shuts down. You're just kind of in this mode where you're really likely to react by being uncivil. That's where you get competitive because you feel like you have to win to stay
Yeah.
safe. Like a lot of this is safety. And
Yes.
so a lot of the things about the law and how it's practiced now make our brains feel like and our bodies feel like we're unsafe. And then we go back to, you know, caveman times because our brain really hasn't evolved very much. When we feel unsafe, we go into fighting or running away or freezing and shutting down,
Yeah.
which is the exact opposite of what we need as lawyers.
Of civility. It's the opposite of
Yeah,
being civil,
it's
right?
exactly so
Yeah.
law, the practice of law and everything that goes into it right now causes us to go into a state where we're going to be the exact opposite of civil. And so I kind of go through like, you have to have tools. Like lawyers, what we need are tools to make our brain and body believe that they're safe so that we can access our empathy circuit, so that we can access it, bring the part of us that collaborates, the part of us that trusts. There's actually a neurotransmitter, oxytocin or hormone. It's kind of a combination of the two. Oxytocin. You hear it talked about with children and bonding with their moms, but in the workforce, it's what allows us to have trust. And when we're stressed, we suppress that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because we've all heard about cortisol and how, cortisol stress. So law, all these reasons spikes our cortisol, our stress
Yeah.
hormones. And when cortisol goes up, oxytocin goes down. But also when oxytocin goes up, cortisol goes down, which means that the more we can create law firms where there's a lot of trust, the more lawyers can become resilient in handling stress.
Mm,
The more stress they can handle, and the more civil they can be outside of the law. Also, like creating trusting relationships with opposing counsel, like, showing up and being honest, that can also increase the oxytocin, lower the cortisol. Another thing I like to talk about, it's called interpersonal neurobiology. And that's just the fact that we impact each other so much. Our nervous system impacts the other person's nervous system. So if we
right.
walked into a room and we're really stressed, the people around us their stress is going to go up.
Yeah.
But the great counter to that is if we've learned to manage our own stress, and we can walk into a room, and because we're managing our own stress, and some of that is deep breathing, having some kind of mindfulness practice regularly, in the moment, noticing, like being aware enough of, "Oh, my heart's starting to race a little bit. I should do some deep breaths." Like you can do deep breaths if you always have access to your breath. There's something called orienting where you look around the room and maybe you pick 3 colors that you see. It brings you back to the present moment. So if you can be the one that calms your own nervous system, then you're going to calm the nervous system of everyone around you, and then everybody's can be more civil. Everybody can access. We can shut down that amygdala, which is the part of the brain that takes over under stress. We can calm that down. We can allow our prefrontal cortex, which is for what we need for the empathy circuit, what we need to be thinking and collaborating. We can get that oxytocin going. So by having tools to calm yourself down in the moment and having regular practices that just help you feel safer, you can become a more civil attorney. And there's another point I want to make, because I think this is a really important point. So years ago, I took a class just for coaches given by this woman named Angeles Arian. So she was an anthropologist who studied different cultures and figured out what worked for them. And then she went into corporations and did corporate training. And one thing she said, she was Basque. Her family at least was from the Spanish region, region in Spain. And she said, one thing I'll never understand about America, it's like we all see conflict as like a fight. And if
Yeah.
we can change our minds and see conflict as a call for collaborative problem solving and walk into situations with that mindset,
Yeah.
a lot more good can happen. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that applies to law. Boy, does
Yeah.
that apply to law.
Yeah. Yeah. Shifting that mindset to, that conflict is just a signal that
Hmm.
there's something to be worked out. There's,
Exactly.
it's not a negative or a bad thing or a
Hmm.
fight or, all the things that we attribute to it. Yeah.
Right.
Wouldn't that shift everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's it. I do a lot of like training on difficult conversations, like for people in their law firm, especially for how to set
Mm,
boundaries on time. And that's one
yeah.
thing that I really make a point of, like, let's stop seeing conflict or difficult conversations as a stressful situation, because like the studies show that people are like, they fear public speaking the most,
Yeah.
and then like conflict and then death.
Yeah.
Which
Right. I know.
I'm like, do people really think much before those studies? But like
Right.
conflict doesn't have to be scary, right? Like
Yeah.
conflict, and if we can start to see it again as a call for collaborative problem solving, and
Mm,
when we have those skills to calm our own nervous system down so we can help calm the nervous system down of the people around us, that's where I think we're going to see changes in the law.
mm.
And that's kind of what I dedicate my coaching to.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I wonder, I just gonna pick your brain about that for a little bit because I started meditating in law school. My wife and I went to law school together, so we started that luckily very early. It was a hugely valuable tool to get through law school,
Hmm.
and since then, once we started our firm and my stress level started ratcheting up, managing a firm and litigating at the same time, we just began searching for all the other tools. And so, things you've mentioned, qigong
Hmm.
and deep breathing and acupuncture and yoga and all the things. And I just kind of put this patchwork of things together to manage my stress. But I found myself feeling like, and I imagine this is familiar or that you've helped clients with this too. And I'm curious what advice you give to people of kind of feeling like I'm on a roller coaster in that space because you can't control how opposing counsel is going to behave, and you can't control your clients. And so there's just this constant like stress comes way up and then you bring it down, and then it
Yeah.
comes way up and then you bring it down, which is good practice. And I think over time you can make those kind of bring the peaks and valleys closer together. But I also found that once I stopped litigating, I didn't realize, despite all that work I was doing and the practices I had, that I just had this underlying anxiety that
Hmm.
I didn't know it was there until it wasn't there anymore. And so I'm curious your take on that, and how, how you help your clients with that type of management,
Well, I think it's a couple things and a couple points that you brought out in that. One, yeah, sometimes we have this low level of anxiety in our profession. One thing that I teach is you have to have some regular practices. You can't like you need to have something you come back to. It doesn't have to be perfect, but pick something you love. It could be doing Pilates. It could be I do something called the melt method, which I absolutely love. It could be sitting. It could be walking. Find something you love and do it regularly, because that's gonna, like think of our nervous system, and here's fight or flight, and here's
Yeah.
like calm, and then
Yeah.
here's like burned out. Because burned out, like if you don't want
Yeah.
to be too calm for too. And
Right.
you want it to be going up and down. Like you want it to sort of look a little bit like a heart monitor, like you described.
Hmm.
And it's okay, like, it's okay to have those little bits of going up and down, of getting into a little bit of fight or flight. I mean, we need some sympathetic, which is the part of the nervous system that relates to fight or flight, to get us activated and motivated. What
Yeah.
we really want and should be concerned about is, are we coming down?
Mm.
Are
Yeah.
we recovering from that? Is it little short bits, or is it going up and staying? And when you said you had that low level of anxiety all the time, that's because it was going up and staying.
Right.
So what I kind of teach my clients is like not to get too stressed about when you go up, but to self-awareness. Number
Mm.
one is self-awareness.
Yeah.
Notice when you're going up. Notice when you're getting a little bit activated. Check out the situation. Is it okay to be a little bit activated right now? Then use those tools that you can use in the moment. I do something also called EFT tapping, and you can
Yeah.
sometimes you can hide it under a desk.
Yes. Yeah.
Find that tool that works for you in the moment, and be self-aware enough to notice when you're going into fight or flight and bring yourself back, and then have a regular practice. So just in general, you're going to stay further away from fight or flight. So
Yeah.
it's kind of the two things. So your
Yes.
baseline's
Nice.
lower, your baseline is like calmer. Well, and I don't want to say calm, more regulated, more
Right.
ability. It's really about having the choice about your behavior.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's great. Yeah, so I that's all really helpful. Any of those tools, if anyone hasn't looked into EFT tapping, that's amazing. I've done that for a while. People should look into that. And I next kind of wonder what I found myself really just I have a lot of respect for lawyers and what lawyers do, and think it's very important work as well. I also just have some underlying, skepticism, maybe even cynicism about our system and where we're at right now. And I'm just curious your thoughts on that. If there's, what advice you give to lawyers who are just kind of questioning the system as it is, bigger, you know, which is bigger than just I have a client that stresses me out or this case is really stressful. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I think that's a good point. I mean, there's a real access to justice problem, because the system costs so incredibly much. I was actually involved in a real estate situation where we had to end up settling because it was costing us, like, we had to spend 150,000 on, and we hadn't even gotten to doing a deposition. So there's a major access to justice problem. What I would say is this: our society, like, lawyers still do important work. Right now, it's flawed. The system is flawed, but lawyers still have really important work to do. And there are ways to find meaning and purpose. And the more meaning and purpose you can find in your work, the more you can stay truly aligned with your core values and find meaning and purpose in your work, the bigger of a difference you can make. And so you want to
Yeah.
really try to do that and make that big difference. If it gets to you too much, you can use those skills in other ways. That's a possibility too, because you don't want to be in a career where you feel like you're fighting with your core values all the time.
Right.
But
Right.
I think we're better off with lawyers, and the people that are questioning the system are the ones that really are in touch with their core values. So I think it's
Yeah.
good for
Yeah.
them to stay in the practice of law. And I would say, work to change it. Do little things yourself, like uh, maybe contribute to smaller law firms, maybe contribute more to programs that help legal justice. If you're at a big firm, like use the money you make to contribute to programs that help increase access to justice. There's a lot of ways we can change it, and then just always yourself, always thinking about, you want to zealously represent your clients, but you also want to help humanize your clients. And sometimes clients are so angry, and when your client is so angry, they're not going to be making the best decisions because they're cut off again. Bringing neuroscience in, they're cut off from that thinking part of their brain. So the more you can help your clients see kind of the bigger picture, the more you can do to help the situation. So I would say, yeah, there are problems. Looking at them and trying to see what you can do to have the biggest impact on those, and also just making sure that you are staying aligned. And if you're in a position, and if you're in a job or a firm where you cannot stay aligned with your core values, it's time to make a change. And
Yeah.
maybe you can start your own firm.
Right. Yeah. That's all really, really good advice. And you brought this up and it's kind of becoming a theme of our conversation here, but this kind of double-sided coin, which is lawyers need to learn how to regulate our nervous systems and manage ourselves. But we also, I think, have lost sight of, or maybe never had sight of, that we need to also do that for our clients
Yes.
and help them stay grounded and centered and calm. And that, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but there's this, and actually this goes back to the Abraham Lincoln quote of encouraging our clients to resolve and settle, and there will still be business enough. That in engaging in these types of practices and having an understanding of neuroscience, even basic, and helping our clients with that it makes them better clients. I
Right.
don't love that phrase, better clients, but we talk about client management all the time and all these, things. And I think if you have a well-regulated, grounded, calm client, they're going to be a better witness. They're going to
hmm
connect with the jury better. They're going to be
hmm
easier to deal with. It helps bring there's just again, back to these connections. It just spreads to everything.
Yes. And I think the more we can regulate ourselves, then we regulate the people around us.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
clients are not coming to us because they're in a happy, good part of their life, unless maybe they're
Right.
running a company. But
Yes. Yep.
especially with litigation, they're
Yeah.
not coming to us because what's going on in their life is good. So we
Mhm.
can really give them a service by keeping our nervous system regulated, by showing them compassion, but not getting so caught up in their problems that we lose sight of our ability to regulate our nervous system.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I think we could talk for a lot longer. I have one more question for you, which is what's these days, what's giving you hope about the future of the legal system?
That's a great question to ask me right now, because I just finished 22 interviews with lawyers and coaches for lawyers. I'm doing this summit, it's the Thriving in Law Summit, and I talk to lawyers who are finding meaning and purpose in their work. People like Neil Chatterjee, who put together an organization of lawyers to help fight the executive orders that were coming out. I talked to someone, John Harity, who actually wrote a book on how to create a love revolution in the law.
Mm,
I talked to, just so many people who are doing great things in the law, who are really trying to make their values be a part of their work, who are helping lawyers do that. So I think that is all helping. And then there's also just all the information about nervous system regulation that has come out in the last few years. And I'm really seeing back when I was the only big firm lawyer at the meditation conference to now where big firms are now having people come in and teach meditation. Like, I
Yeah.
think that there is a shift towards having better well-being, towards paying attention to the nervous system. And I think that will make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely seeing it even just in the time that I've been practicing, that it's, these things are becoming more mainstream. That's really encouraging. Well,
Yeah.
Thank you for all the work you're doing. I appreciate you taking the time to chat today. If you would, could you let people know where they can find you and, if they want to reach out, or what's the best way to get in touch?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So steelleadership.com is my website. I list my offerings, but if something doesn't exactly fit, there's a contact me page, or you can just email me, put, lawyers as healers as the subject line. So it'll jump out and I'll notice it, but it's G Steele. So STEELE at steelleadership.com. So happy to have conversations with people, talk to them about what I offer, but also just kind of talk to them if they're feeling really overwhelmed and trying to decide what to do and what next steps to take.
Amazing. That's perfect. And I'll put your information in the show notes too, so people can look there to find your links.
Great. Thank you.
Gina, thank you again. I know you've got kids about the same age as mine, and so I'll let you go attend to that. And again, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk, and thanks for all the work you're doing to, change the trajectory of the legal system. Really admirable work.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the work you're doing.